In tape 4, I went over some of the basic positions on the ground, from taking the man down to being able to controlling him on the ground. When you get a guy on the ground, I can't even emphasize enough how important it is for you to be able to control his hips, and to control his hips means to control him. When you have him down on the ground, if you're able to do that, it makes your game so much easier. You cut your work in half. It's not an easy thing to do. It's an easy thing to say. It's not an easy thing to do. A lot of times when you see NHB fights, you see a struggle for position. And that position is to gain control of the man on the ground. And I am telling you, the easiest way to do it is to gain control of his hips. Most of you that have seen me compete know that one of my favorite shots that I like to take is a double leg. A lot of the variety of the finishes is what makes me a good technician, is that anyone can shoot. Your ability to be able to finish your holds is what makes you either good or great. One shot that I showed earlier in tape 1 was a fundamental shot, is your basic double leg shot, where you're getting in on your opponent, you're attacking his lead leg and capturing it. Now what makes it really, really difficult is from this position is to be able to finish. One easy technique for me, not for everyone, is to be able to finish in a position where I'm controlling his hips. I like to be able, if I cannot just take him off of his feet right away, I like to be able to control him here, pop him up in the air. When I pop him up in the air, I feed a hand through the center. When I feed a hand through the center, I reach across and I trap his leg. When I trap his leg, I pop him off of me, and when I pop him off of me, I'm in good position, right to here. Now there's 2 variations to that that'll put you in good position to be able to come into a mount from a side mount position. One of the techniques that I use for a finishing hold is to pop him up. One thing that you have to be able to do when you're in these positions is you have to be able to stay balanced, and you have to be able to lower and raise your level. And there's a little drill that you can do. I sit here like this, on my hip, and I imagine that I have a guy on top of me, that I'm picking him up and I'm setting him down. I'm picking him up and I'm setting him down. So if Tom was on top of me here, I'm picking him up, I'm setting him down. I'm picking him up, I'm setting him down. All the while I'm staying balanced. All the while, he's 250 pounds, and I'm picking him up and I'm setting him down, all with one leg. This is it. And this is what makes this work. Is from one split second, when I set my shot up, capturing his front leg, pulling myself in, now I'm in position here. He's going to weight himself on me. I pick him up in the air. I reach in between his legs, grab his leg, pulling it down, and popping him off. And when I pop him off, I had this hand, I change over to here, and from here, I can continue on to a full mount position. What I do is I do a knee slide up. I'm still controlling his hips. He can't move, because the struggle for him now is to regain his balance. He can continue to struggle. One thing that I do is I control him here. Easiest way for me to control him fully is to put my knee to the center of his belly. I do a knee slide here. And if you look at one of the things that makes it work is that back here on his butt, on this side with my foot, I'm hooking. I hook right here. When I hook here, I'm controlling him here. I can control him. He can't move anywhere, especially if I'm here. He can try slide all he wants. He can do whatever he wants. I'm in a position right now to administer strikes. It takes the wind out of him. I'm in a position to administer strikes however I want to do it. Elbow strikes, hand strikes. I can administer strike with my knee. But all the while, as I'm keeping a lot of pressure on his solar plex, I'm hooked here, I'm hooked over here. Now to finish into a full mount position, I do a shin slide. What I want to do is trap his hips down to the ground by taking my knee from his solar plex, sliding my shin across his hip bones, and I just let it roll straight down, keeping balance. Like I said, from the shot, it's so important. I can't emphasize this enough, is that what's going to make you great is your ability to finish. Anyone can shoot. I've gotten past his punches, his knees, his kicks. I'm in a position to finish. I get him nice and tight to me here. I pick him up in the air. When I pick him up in the air here, I turn here, grab his leg. And when I grab his leg, I pull it underneath. You'll see I pull it underneath. And I don't care how hard he holds on to me. When I pull it underneath him and I push him, he's going to fall off me. He's going to fall off. I keep control of this. I feed my other hand over here, and it traps that leg down to the ground. He's going to be squirming and squirming and squirming. I'm going to stay in control. What I want to do, if you notice a couple things I do, is I control his head and I control his legs. And by controlling his legs in this position, I control his hips, like I said at the beginning. And the final part of it that gives me the total control is I slide up here, tight, very tight. And I put my knee in his solar plex, and I keep my weight on him. And it's like putting a tack into a board. This is it right here. I'm nailing him right there. With this weight and pressure on him, and with me controlling him here, he turns into me here. I step over and lock. I step over and lock. He's not going anywhere. I can administer enough punishment from this position to where any arena that you're in, whether it's in the cage or in the ring, where he's gonna get stopped. I can administer that much punishment from this place. He has no leverage on anything that he's gonna be able to do to me. I can trap him down. You have easy foot locks from here. I can turn over here. You can see how tight this gets. Okay? It's just as well, it's just like a key lock. It's just like if I had here and I had a key lock. It's the same thing on his ankle. Here, underneath, over the top. How tight?
That's very tight.
He can tap anytime. Okay? A point that I want to emphasize, when you change off from this to this here, is that when I step over to lock this leg down, I have to trap this knee down as well. If I just step over here, he rolls all the way through, and he's back out. If I step over from this here, and when I step over, and I trap this between my legs, guess what? He ain't going anywhere. I trap him down. Now, he's going to fight like anything. You have to see how much control I have, but I still have to keep my balance. Now, it hurts, and the way that I administer a lot more pain is I push this up, and I crawl my leg up, and I hook it a little deeper. And if I really want, what happens is back here is I can figure four my legs here. And Lucky Tom's pretty flexible, because otherwise it becomes really painful. And from this position, this is just a stabilizer, because in order for me to administer strikes, I have to get space to be able to administer strikes however I want. But it's really important to emphasize you have to trap that leg down. Like I've talked about before, in a mount position, you have to keep some concepts in mind. Is one, when you have the man underneath you, he's definitely going to be bucking and kicking and trying to get out from underneath you. Your balance points in your position have to be really stable in order for you to utilize the mount position till its fullest. One of the ways from a side mount that I come into a full mount position is I utilize my knee into the solar plex, which I've talked about. And what I do to make it a little more stable is I hook my foot underneath his butt. When I hook my foot underneath his butt, it's like me putting this pressure on his solar plex, nails him to the ground. And it doesn't matter if he turns into me, it makes it a lot easier for me to full mount him. And I call it shinning him. What I do from here is I slide across and I put my shin across his hip bone, and then I slide my knee down. And when I slide my knee down, I come into a full mount position. Now, one thing that you have to understand from a full mount position is that I don't want to be back too far, because I'm right on his power, I'm right on his hips, and he can buck me up. And when he bucks me up, it's a lot easier to knock me off balance and be able to turn me. Where I like to get for a full mount position is I like to crawl up on him, and I push on his head, and I want to crawl up to his armpits. For a full mount position, this is where I'd like to be. If I could, I'd like to close his arms down, and I'd like to have his arms right here. It's almost smothered and makes it really difficult for him to breathe. I'm pinching my legs together. And from this position here, it makes it really difficult. Even if he wanted to slide underneath me, he couldn't slide underneath me because he has no power. So basically, when I come to the full mount position, even if he's locked onto me here, I definitely want to push on his head, and I want to work my way up. And when I work my way up on him, I'm pushing on his head, utilizing that and pinching my legs together. Now it doesn't matter if he bucks and turns and jives because I'm away from his power. As long as I'm away from his power, I'm a lot more likely to stay in the mounted position than if I give him the opportunity down here to lock on to me. Now I put my center of gravity over his power, and he's able to buck me a lot easier, or he's able to trap me and roll me. You have to keep your stable point out. Really important. And I'm sure that you've seen this, and people have told you over and over again, but you really have to focus in on it, because the second that I lose my balance, he can take advantage of that. And I give up a great opportunity and a great position here. This is an excellent position to administer strikes from, and to be able to move around and get in position for arm locks and get in positions for chokes. Remember, when you're in this position, you definitely want to be up high. You want to pinch your legs together. If I can trap his arms in here like this, it's really uncomfortable. He's not grimacing because he likes to. He's grimacing because it's not comfortable. From this position, he'll try to force his hands down, and I can hold his hands. He can protect his face semi-well, but if I push his face down, I can really administer a lot of strikes from here. But the higher I am up on his body, the better it is for me. I can even control arms over. If I'm down a little, I can control arms over to either side. And it's a lot easier to control that arm, and he has a lot less strength the second I take it across the body than he is when he's out here. Plus, when you're in this position and you're up, it really takes away his advantage to be able to strike me. Like I said, from the side mount position, you have to understand the basic principles of keeping the distance tight. The tighter I am, the better off I am. I control his hips. I'm using this to push into him to keep the position tight. A lot of times what happens from here, what I like to do is either control his head one way or the other. If I'm using knees as part of my striking offense, what I do is I control his head, I strike with my knee, and all of this is to get him to open up. Usually from this position, if I administer a knee strike, his likely tendency is to block it with his hand. He's going to block it with his hand here. From this position, what I like to do is I like to do a side choke, and I set it up by striking with my knees. I plant a hand down here, still keeping the distance tight, still keeping him where he can't slide away from me. Turning his head, administer the strike. He doesn't want the strike, he blocks. When he blocks, I take his elbow, push his elbow across, and I trap it with my head. When I trap it with my head, here's where I really have to start to go to work. Is I want to take this bone here and I want to trap it along his jugular on this side. And when I do that, I'm going to lock my hands and I'm going to slide my head down further. I just keep working my head down. And what makes his choke really tight from this position is I'm going to flatten my hips out here. And when I flatten my hips out, now I want to pinch my elbows together. And when I pinch my elbows together, I'm going to pull his head into me. And to even make it worse, I can come up off of my knees and roll into him. And it gets tight. Now again, to make it really effective is setting this whole thing up is I keep the body tight. And when I keep it tight, I'm controlling his body. I turn his head. I'm going to knee strike, knee strike. He doesn't want it. He's either going to block me down here to keep it away. He doesn't want it up there. I'm going to grab it, force it across. It doesn't matter how it does, how I do it, or how he does it. I'm going to force that arm across. He's in a very vulnerable position. He wants to protect his head. He's going to have his hands up to protect his head. He doesn't want those strikes. Take it, push it across. When I push it across, I trap it. This hand goes to work. I can go really deep with it, or I can go shallow with it. If I go deep with it here, I definitely have to create leverage. I make that as tight as I can. And what makes it even tighter, I scissor my leg. And when I scissor my leg, I'm going to come up off of my knees, and I'm going to roll into him. And when I roll into him, I squeeze really tight. And when I squeeze really tight, it ends up cutting off his blood and his air. It's a combination choke. And the more you play around with it, the more effective you can become in getting your bone here to come across his jugular and getting his own arm to suffocate him. It's a really effective choke. You can play around with it. You become really, really effective with it. And I think it'll work great for you. Some of the various positions that you end up in are not your traditional positions. Some of them seem very unorthodox, but through a lot of viewing of tapes and looking at NHB fights, you realize that there's common positions. There's positions that you end up in repeatedly. You see them over and over and over again. And one position that I see quite often is you end up in a lock position like this. It's a scrambling position. You end up for a takedown, you end up whatever position, and you end up polar opposite each other. You end up either in this position or some form of it. One thing that I am definitely aware of when I'm in this position here is that I'm aware of what he can utilize as his tools for striking. The only thing that he has available to strike are his knees, which at this particular angle he can generate a lot of power with and a lot of leverage. You definitely don't want to take those. So your first awareness in this position is to be totally aware of his knees. I put an elbow down in his crotch and I put a hand up to block him. That's my first priority. My second priority is to make him aware that I know that he has his knees by administering a strike with my knee. You can get good leverage on it, and you can use this as a post to be able to keep him posted on the ground. I'm pushing hard on him now. Tom can go ahead and try to knee me. I'm pushing hard on him here. But at the same time, I can administer a knee strike of my own. That makes him fully aware that I have my weapons too. The thing that I like to do from this position, you have to do it rather quickly and explosively, is I like to push his head, is to get him to break his lock. The other thing that I like to do is a reverse arm bar. Now you can relax for a second, Tom. And what I mean by that is from this position here is that he's given me this arm already trapped by locking onto my torso. And when he gives me that arm trapped and I have this leg free, it sets up for a good position for me to be able to arm bar him. And you'll see what I'm talking about. He's locked onto me here. I'm protecting against this. You can tell that I'm on my knees here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to force his head down. And when I force his head down, I'm just going to crawl this leg over it. When I crawl this leg over it, see this arm here? I'm going to hook under this arm. Now it all happens just at the same time. It's not a slow thing. If we're down here fighting, I'm holding against it. I'm going to push his head down. It leaves me open for a knee strike. But at the same time, I'm going to finish this. I'm going to come in here and here. I'm going to set up really fast, and I'm pushing down with this head. Now, it's my training partner, so I'm not going to mash his head. But if it's an opponent, you're literally sitting on his head. And if you look at the vulnerability of position here, is look what I have. I lock right here. It's a hammer lock on his shoulder and on his arm. You can ask Tom how hard this is. It's pretty painful. And then to finish the hold, I sit through, and when I sit through, I hammer down right here, and I pull him back. Now I'm going to relax because this is my training partner. But you can see from this, it's not a traditional arm bar. If he turns his arm either way, he can turn it this way, and I'm still locked against his joint. He can't turn it the other way. If he turns it the other way, it becomes even tighter. It's not a traditional arm bar where you're taking it from here, from this position where you need his thumb up and his fingers down. From this position here, I can lock against his shoulder or his elbow. And the way that you come into it is from this position here, is that I pull myself up and away from him. He can lock onto me and hold me pretty tight. I can pull myself up, and as I pull myself up, it locks him right into it. Because I'm going to push his head down, either with a fist or from the outside. And I'm going to trap it with my leg. I'm going to step up and trap it with my leg. And when I do that, he can try and roll away, but if he rolls away, it just tightens it. If he rolls into me, it tightens it. I'm in control because I'm blocking his head down. And if I want gain full control here, it's really tight. It locks his shoulder and his elbow. It's non-traditional arm bar. Because if I just lean back a little bit on it, I'm going to really hurt him. Just as with my other techniques that I've shown you, my primary objective when I attack is to control and to come to a side mount position. And from that side mount position, I have the opportunity and option whether to stay there or come to a full mount. So from my basic leg capture and front leg, my double leg, I'm shooting in here. I get to a position here where I can do a couple different things. I showed you where I pop him up and take him down. I can turn him down and take him down. Or another option is I literally pick him up, and when I pick him up in the air, I swing and slide down. Now in real NHB, I'm going to pick him up and I'm going to drive him to the ground. And when I drive him to the ground, it puts me in a position where I'm in a side mount position. And from the side mount position, there's a couple of things that I really, really like to do as far as finishing holds. And again, the easy thing that you have to understand is that you are in control. When I attack him, if I don't blow him off of his feet, he's gonna start defending me. He can defend with a cross face, whatever. And what I was saying earlier about being able to raise and lower your level from this position is being able to take this right here. He puts all his weight on me here, and I pick him up. And when I pick him up, I'm in total control. It's really easy to pick him up when you have good technique. What I like to do from here is I like to swing him and slide him and literally drive him. He's my training partner, and like I've been saying all along, with your training partner, you got to do things a little lighter. I grab him here, and when I grab him here, I spin him and I spike him. It's a spin and a spike. And when I come down with my shoulder right into his solar plexus. And it puts me in a good position where I can side mount. Now for you guys, I'm going to work on this side of him. Go ahead and go down. I'm going to work from this position so you can see a couple different techniques that I utilize in here. First and foremost, like I've been emphasizing again, is to control my space. I don't want distance between us. The more distance I have between us, the easier it is for him to be able to switch his hips, regain his balance, and be able to cause all kinds of flurries that I don't want to be in. So when I take him down, spike him down, when I hit, I'm in control. I want to close the space, and I'm going to keep this space as tight as possible at all times. Because this enables me to hand fight down here, the hand fight for my key locks, key lock either this way or key lock the other way. Fish underneath. Those are two locks that I'm going to show in more detail. But for right now, a good technique and a good hold that I like to utilize is I like to utilize a headlock, but it's a variation. Because a lot of people don't understand it's as simple as for him to cross his legs, to cross your legs, and it takes away my leverage when I grab a normal headlock. If I'm trying to squeeze him out, I can't get any leverage if he simply just crosses his legs. It allows him to stop me from squeezing. He takes that leg down, he doesn't know this, and I roll him up, and it's really tight. If he crosses his legs, I can't get that leverage. So one thing that I like to do, I scoop his arm underneath his elbow. And when I scoop his arm underneath his elbow, that changes the whole lock. I scoop it underneath his elbow, and I lock finger to finger. And what I do is I slide forward on his body, and when I slide forward on his body, I lock my hands. And when I lock my hands, it locks his shoulder out. And when I slide it tight, it's tight to my stomach, and it's tight lock. And what I do from here is I rotate that elbow up. And it's a lot of pressure. And what I do to make it tighter is I slide my hips forward and down. Still stay in balance, because he's going to buck and he's going to toss and turn. But the whole problem is he can't go anywhere. I'm in total control. And when I want to finish it, when I want him to tap, I take this hand here, I take this bone, and I rotate it up. And it puts a lot of pressure on it. And then when I lock it all together, it taps. You have to understand, when you're doing this with your partner, you got to be really careful. First off, picking him up in the air and laying him down on the ground, that's practice. In the real NHB world, when you're doing it, either in the ring, in the octagon, on the street, you can pick him up and you can say with authority, boom, hit him down on the ground. And you got to recover your position, always staying balanced. I like to come to a side mount position here for this particular hold. I like to climb up on him, control his head, still being aware of his ability to strike me, blocking his strikes. I cover his head, scoop under the elbow with my hand pointed, my thumb up. It gives that razor edge right here, which makes it a good lever. And it locks his shoulder out. I curl my hands together, slide my body all the way tight, walk my hips out, and then when I want it over, I just arch up. Another technique for submission and a mount on the ground is from my over and under position, as I showed you on tape 3, is that I use an arm spin. And it's really effective if a guy takes away your body lock, takes away your inside trip, and he gives you this position. And a good finishing position for this on the ground is I execute my arm spin. Remember, I'm pulling on the elbow, I'm turning, I'm loading his hip to hip, and I'm bowing. And it happens quickly because for a second, I give him a little bit of an advantage because I give him my back. So I turn, arm spin down. When I arm spin down, immediately, I'm adjusting my position. I have to secure the arm, and when I do, I slide up on him and I cover him. And as you can see here, when I deliver that arm spin and I'm here, I hit the ground immediately. I'm coming up and I'm covering. And when I cover, I slide in with my knee and I get as tight as I can and I cover his body. I showed from this position a couple different ways to submit. I showed a reverse arm bar that you can do. I showed a headlock, which actually is a shoulder crank. And another technique that I like to use is a key lock. Most key locks traditionally from the side mount are executed putting your weight on the guy, keeping the space closed, locking the wrist, locking onto your own wrist. And the key to these is, for me, is to drag his knuckles on the ground. And at the same time, I'm elevating his elbow. I'm dragging up and down. And it becomes really tight and effective. One thing that I like to utilize is a reverse key lock, okay? And the reason why I like to use that a little bit better is that for these positions, these are so widely used that most people know when you're starting to try to trap down, immediately they start pulling their hands away because they know that this is what you're going for. It's a lot easier for me to control an arm down to its side than it is above his head, because I have my body weight that I can control him here. I control his arm like this on the side, and I'm going to turn so you can see what I'm talking about. A lot of times I can trap that arm in tight to him here, and what I do is I bait him here. I'm covering his body, my knees are tight, I'll play with his head or chest and get him to think that I'm striking here. He wants to cover, he starts to move this arm up. When he moves this arm up, I'm trapping his bicep. When I trap his bicep, I slide down to his wrist. And I slide down to his wrist and I pull here, trapping down. So I'm trapping his arm in, catching it here, sliding down to his wrist. And when I do that, this other hand here that I was striking his head with, I slide under and down. Literally slide under and down. And from this position here, it really sets up for a good lock. Now if you look at it again, you're going to have to play around with it. There's little variations to it that each individual will come up with. What necessarily works for me won't exactly work for you. And that's one thing to keep in mind with all these techniques, is that they're how I use them. You can take them and use your own little variations, but use the same concepts and specialize them for yourself. What I use for this is I trap this down here and I come up and I start cross-body riding him. I'm still in good control and good position. It gives me effective elbow strikes in here, and also it gives me effective knee strikes. And at the same time when I'm restracting him, I slide down, trapping his arm to the ground. As I trap his arm to the ground, I trap it here with my body weight. I'm going to slide my hand flat, palm down, under, and I'm going to lock it onto my wrist. Already it's tight. If I adjust down and across here, it becomes even tighter. And the thing that makes this effective, if I just rock up on it, it's fairly effective. I'm going to have to really apply a lot of pressure to get him to tap. But what happens is that I'm going to do one big step over his head. I'm going to pick his body up here, and I'm going to step over his head. And when I step over his head, he has a tendency, most people, is to roll, continue to roll out and under, and they'll roll away from it. But what I do is I trap his body down here. I trap his body between my legs.
And when I trap his body between my legs, all I do is take and rotate this arm in, and I push this out. I rotate out like this, and it traps him down. But one thing you have to understand is why I'm stepping up here is I'm pulling him up to control him, but I have to step over the head. And when I step over the head, I have total control of his body. He can't spin out from underneath me because I'm pinching his body. And if I really, if he's not submitting, what I can do is I can take my knee here and the crooks of my knee, and I put pressure down on his head, and at the same time, I pull on his elbow. And when I pull on his elbow, I rotate this out and up. You'll see what I'm doing like this, and I'm pushing. And you'll see the pry like this, his hand's here, and I'm prying like this with my arm, and I'm pushing it away. At the same time, I'm trapping his head down. It's right in the crooks of my knee, right here. So it's this lever right here, this here, and at the same time, I'm pushing away. And it's really tight. Now remember, when you're trapping this, it's not going to be an easy lock to get. Neither is this lock here. This lock's not an easy lock to get either. Both locks are really effective, and you're going to have to fight for them. More times than not, it's going to be hard to trap this guy's hand down. He'll have his hand fighting down. And if he's fighting his hand down here, I can work it down here, push, trap down. Trap it down to the ground, grabbing his wrist. Slide my hand flat, locking it down. When I got it locked secure, I want to keep this knee tight to his body. Keep it tight to his body. And you'll turn for me, Tom. You'll turn and see what I'm talking about. This knee's tight to the body when I got that lock. Tight to the body, stepping up, pulling it here. Controlling him. We'll slide again so you can see. I'll rotate for you. You'll see what I'm talking about. A lot of times the guy will try to force his hand inside, but you're strong enough here where I can force it up. He has no strength in it. He has no strength in it at all. When I take it away from his body, and I turn it and turn it, you'll see what I'm doing, and I'll pry it up, and I'll push it down. It's pressure on his elbow and his shoulder. Now remember, when you're training with your partner, that you have to be really careful. I was actually a little harder down than I should have been. But you got to be really careful with your partner when you're executing these holds, because your partner actually probably gets to do them on you next. So you'll know what to do. As I showed you in the previous tapes, is that part of your game plan should be to keep your distance, to execute your technique from within your range, but sometimes that doesn't always happen. Sometimes you end up getting into his striking and punching range. One of the techniques that I showed you earlier to absorb a kick is to step in and take that kick. When he kicks, you're stepping in and you're absorbing the kick with your thigh. It takes and absorbs all of that, so you're not going to take a full-on thigh kick. And I was going to show you the finishing hold. I showed you just the beginning of it. Now I'm going to show you the completion of it, what I like to do from these positions. He kicks, step and absorb it, From here, I'm keeping him away so he can't initiate any offense. And what I do is I take his head down, literally in real fighting, is I'm going to take his head and smash it right into his knee. I'm going to pull it, bang, right off of his knee. And at the same time, I'm going to circle him away from his posted foot. Down here. When I get him down to this position, it's a perfect setup for me to jump into a knee bar. It's a perfect setup. It's without hesitation. Like I said earlier, with your shots and with everything else, it's 100% commitment. When I go for this, it's not a haphazard leap over. It's when I go for it, it's 100%. So as I knock him down to the ground, I'm staying balanced. I'm staying aware of my position. Immediately, I'm going to jump over here. Immediately. Look what happens with my hand position. I had it here. It changes. I'm from here. I let that pop out, and immediately I fall down. And when I fall down, I'm totally aware of where I have his knee locked. I have his knee, it's right above my pelvic. It's not locked on his shin here because I don't have any leverage. I fall into it right on his thighs, I pinch my legs together, and I push my legs out. At the same time, I have his knee here. Now, if I was doing it real time, real speed, what I have is I have jumped into a knee bar, literally. I have jumped into it. Now, if this was real, I'm either going to lock it here to my side here, or I'm going to lock it on the other side. And all I do is grab it here, and I arch my pelvic forward and my chest out. And it's tight. Now remember, your transition exists from this. Your transition was that he kicked, I absorbed the kick, pulled his head down, smacked it off his own knee, dumped him down to the ground. Now I'm in this position right here. This is a scramble position. I take control. Taking control is going 100% from here. I'm jumping into a knee bar. And if it was 100%, and I'm going to let it go, but just to show you, it would be right from here. It would be, except I'd have that leg controlled. That's where I jump into it. I'm going to give him one opportunity to tap. And if not, he's going to end up getting hurt. I prefer a knee bar in this situation as opposed to a heel hook or an ankle lock. The reason why is because if I jump back into this, it gives him a couple opportunities to do things that normally he wouldn't have. I give him an opportunity to lock me. Okay? Don't want to do that. That's why I prefer from this position to stay on my feet to make a transition into a knee bar. Here. Right here. When I jump into it, I literally jump into it. I pinch that between me, clamp my legs together, and I tell you, I give an old heave-ho. It's tight. It's really tight. And the position here is a lot easier for me. It's a lot more difficult for him to have any escape hold from this position because I can keep adjusting myself. So once again, from the top of this, I defend against the kick by stepping in, catching the kick. I want to step in and get it to slide up. Catch the kick, keep him away, bang his head off his knee, circle him down. When I circle him down here, I'm in position for it right away. Without hesitation. Around, I'm jumping around. Here. Transition with my hand. Falling down to my side here, I'm in perfect position for it. Even if I have to adjust back a little, I'm pinching, making sure that his knee is above my pelvic. His knee is above my pelvic, and it gives me plenty of leverage to be able to crank on him. All I have to do is just arch my hips and pull this in. Doesn't matter if he's twisting, turning, flopping, because I can hold this really tight to my head like I am, and the second that I start arching back, it's over. It's over. I've emphasized to you over and over again how important it is to have mobility and balance and power and strength on the ground. This is just a little idea of how you have to move. Always have to keep in mind that you have to have mobility and you have to have quickness and explosiveness. I hope you enjoyed some of these ground techniques I've shared with you on this tape. Remember, this is just a small portion of the techniques that encompass a whole entire ground attack. All you have to do is just practice some of these and work and develop a good foundation, and you'll be able to move on to more advanced techniques further along the line. But for right now, practice the techniques and you'll become better at your ground fighting skills.